I think I may have it. You know, like no. Thanks, Janet. Telepathic. Okay. Heading straight to St. Clair's. It is.
All right. Shall we get started? Welcome, everyone, to the oops. Okay, welcome everyone to the June 13th Portsmouth Town Council meeting. I have to announce that Council President Aguiar is unable to attend, so I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. I'm Linda Ujivuza, and so the first item in our agenda is the emergency evacuation plan. And in the event of an emergency, you may exit out of one of the two side doors or the door behind me. We should exit the building and meet outside in the parking lot of the school department building across the street. And before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We allow remote participation by non-town council members. And so if you're calling by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand or to ask a question. And after you have been called, please press *6 to unmute and mute yourself. For the folks on Zoom, click on the hand icon to raise your hand or drop a question into the chat. After you've been called, please click on the microphone icon to mute and unmute or unmute and mute yourself. Have I left anything out? Okay. Then let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please take the roll?
Here.
Present.
Here.
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 Here. Okay, there is no president's executive summary tonight. So we'll move to the consent agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. The first item is an entertainment license fee waiver request from the Portsmouth Portuguese American Citizens Club at 35 Power Street for the St. Anthony Feast, July 14th to 18th, 2022.
Move to approve
Second.
with the fee waiver. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. The second item is a victualler license fee waiver request. Again, the Portsmouth Portuguese American Citizens Club at 35 Powell Street for the St. Anthony's Feast, July 14th to 18th, 2022.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The third item is a peddler license for the mobile food establishments. The new ones are A, Joshua Berman, doing business as Little Fish Tacos and Service, 47 Walnut Street. B, well, do we take these all together or individually? Madam Clerk? Okay. I will take them all together. B, Milk Cafe and Catering, doing business as Milk Cafe, 567 South County Trail, number 110 in Exeter. And C, Dominic Daniel, DBA, The Daily Grind, 654 Central Avenue, Unit 4, Pawtucket. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Nope.
No,
We
we
gotta
got
do
one
peddler's
more.
license.
Oh,
Number 4.
my goodness, I didn't see that. All right, peddler item 4, peddler license annual. A, Opt LLC, DBA Opt Eyewear Boutique, 138 Wayland Avenue, Providence. And B, Lisa Mackey Design, 1005 Main Street, 116 in Pawtucket.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn from the Board of License Commissioners.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do you have too many on?
Oh.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. The motion passes 6-0.
Motion to adjourn as the Board of
Already did
License
that.
Commissioners.
We just-
That's what we just voted on.
We just did that.
Well, gee, You know,
It was so good. We wanted to do the motion a second time.
You want to sit?
yeah.
We're moving on to the minutes from the
Summary.
May 23rd, 2022 meeting.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. We will move next to the town administrator's report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Madam President, Council, and ladies and gentlemen. With respect to the community electricity aggregation bid that was scheduled for last week, that was postponed. That's due to ongoing market volatility. And with respect to that volatility, we did not believe that we would receive acceptable bids. So the decision was made to solicit it for another procurement in a month. It's my pleasure to announce that the Van Buren Charitable Foundation's Board of Directors has informed me that the foundation's May 2022 meeting, a grant of up to $170,500 payable to the town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island, was approved for expansion of the Portsmouth Dog Park. $133,100 is for the expansion and lighting of the park, and $34,700 is for a parking lot expansion. The parking lot expansion does require a match, which is budgeted for in the Capital Reserve Fund. Andrea Rounds from the Dog Park Committee is here tonight to discuss the project details and seek council approval to work with town staff to move forward with the expansion project. During the budget meetings in April, we discussed the ongoing collective bargaining negotiations with the fire department, the dispatchers, and the Portsmouth Municipal Employees Association. We have since tentatively approved those contracts subject to council approval. Those contracts will be brought forward for your approval at the next council meeting. With respect to the school bond, the town successfully sold its bonds through the state agency Rhode Island Health and Educational Building Corporation, or RIBEC, on Wednesday, June 8th. An underwriting group led by UBS Financial Services sold the bonds, and RW Baird and Amerivet, a service disabled veteran firm, also participated in the sale. The bonds sold at an interest rate of 3.45%, slightly lower than the estimated rate of 3.5%, which was used in the voter referendum. While the market has been very volatile and rates have increased since the beginning of the year, the town benefited from a recent rally in the municipal market that resulted in a decline in interest rates during the past 2 weeks. In connection with the sale, town officials also had a video conference with Standard & Poor's on May 10th. Standard & Poor's reaffirmed the town's AAA bond rating on May 26th. The town's bond council will coordinate the signing of bond documents, which should take place the week of June 20th. The bond issue is scheduled to close on June 28th. On Thursday of this week, June 16th, the annual Rhode Island Clerks Association meeting will be held in Portsmouth. Our town clerk, Jennifer West, will host the meeting at Greenvale Vineyards, and the council president and I have been invited to share some opening remarks. And then lastly, just a reminder that Town Hall will be closed for the Juneteenth federal holiday, which will be observed on Monday, June 20th. Madam President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. The next item is resignations and appointments. The first resignation is of, let's see,
Paula Smolik.
yes, Paula and Ms. Williams. They both served very well on the Parks and Rec Committee, and they will be missed. Do I have a motion?
Move to accept with regret.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. The motion passes 6-0. Next is appointment, Economic Development Committee. There are 6 vacancies.
Move to approve the appointment of Mr. Michael Minot.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. The next item is old business, Solar 101, the solar ordinance explained. Mr. Crosby.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I've been asked by the council a month or so ago to do a Solar 101 explainer of our ordinance. And I thought that I would start by taking a step back and talking about zoning in general for just a few minutes. I don't want to take up the council's time, but I think it's important to understand what zoning is and what it is not. Prior to the 1920s, if I bought a piece of property, this is not ancient law. This is not Magna Carta stuff. This is fairly recent law, that if I bought a piece of property and owned it, I could do whatever I want to with it. And of course, if my neighbor bought a piece of property right next to me, he or she also had the freedom to do what they wanted with their property. So as you can see, that has resulted over the decades, over the last century, in all sorts of problems with incompatible uses. The purpose of zoning is to separate these incompatible uses. And we're talking about private property here. So to separate incompatible uses of private property as reasonably as possible. So we began to set restrictions on landowners' historic rights to the unfettered use of his or her land. Of course, we have to be careful. It's kind of a balancing act because we have to be careful about having restrictions which are too restrictive, in which case would result in what's called a taking, where we would have to purchase the property if there was no reasonable use because of our restrictions. So I think that the benefits of zoning goes both ways. Owners of industrial property don't necessarily want to locate next to residential property where people are complaining about their activities all the time, as well as residential property owners wanting to be located next to commercial or industrial activities. And so it's over the years, it really has established itself as a way of separating incompatible uses. And for the most part, it's worked really quite nicely. There are places where you cannot separate incompatible uses. And so we put in place rules and restrictions that try and mitigate that as much as we can. So our zoning ordinance, the Zoning Enabling Act of 1991, we had zoning in place prior to 1991, but the Zoning Enabling Act of 91 from the state dictated what was necessary, what provisions should be in our zoning ordinance. The ordinance consists of the text that we all see all the time and the official zoning map by which the various districts into which a municipality is divided. Can you put that zoning map up for me, please? Second from the bottom there. Number 5, yeah. So there's our zoning map. Now, you will see that at the time that we put this, we created this zoning map back in the 60s. It's not really a classic, in a classic case, you draw balloons around all of the uses that you have in mind, and we're going to put the residential here, and we're going to put the manufacturing here, and we're going to put the commercial here, and we're going to put the open space is going to be here, but it doesn't. In our case, we had 350 years worth of development that was in place, and so we drew a zoning map that tried to agglomerate uses as much as possible, and clearly we were going to end up having uses that don't fit the zoning. That's why we end up with houses, for example, that were built in 1820 that are in properties that are zoned commercial, or why we have the little mini mart up there in Common Fence Point, a commercial endeavor in a residential zone. So that it's always going to have been problematic, but it's the best way we have for separating uses. So incompatible uses. So the zoning ordinance was adopted first in 1965. It was rewritten in 1980, and then again in 1994 with new, not just the text, but the map as well. So to look at our zoning ordinance, I think I think it's important to see what the structure of the zoning ordinance is so that we can see what the structure of the solar piece of it is. The zoning ordinance, there's a total of 20 articles in the zoning ordinance, but there's 4 of them which are most important. Article number 3 is the division into districts, and this is where we draw the map. And we interpret, there's provisions for interpreting the boundaries and so forth. But that's Article 3 establishes the map, division into districts. And we have there are 5 residential districts. Excuse me, we have commercial district, light industrial, heavy industrial, waterfront district, and town center. Article 4 is the district intensity regulations. And this is where we talk about setbacks and lot coverage and height and lot frontage and minimum lot size, all the things that sort of regulate the character of the use of the property, so that it dictates density. And in the case of the residential, there's 5 different densities that we talk about in the ordinance. The Article 5, which is perhaps the most important, is the use regulations. There's a table of uses. We have all of our districts, and we have all of our uses, and they're either permitted by special use permit, they're permitted by right, or they're prohibited. And so clearly we can't enumerate all of the uses that people want to put their property to, but generally speaking, we have a set of uses that are, again, permitted by right, special use permit, or prohibited in each of the districts that we have established. Now, Article 6 is non-standard development. And there's 2 pieces of non-standard development which are very important. One is substandard lots of record. So when we first drew our zoning map, we have, for example, an R10 zone or an R20 zone. Let's pick an R20 zone. If there is a parcel of land that was already established prior to that zoning map being drafted, that was less than the minimum lot size, 20,000 square feet, it was 10,000 square foot lot, it was considered a substandard lot of record. And in the zoning ordinance, there's a series of regulations about how you can expand a substandard lot of record, how you can deal with the setbacks and so forth for a substandard lot of record. So that's in the ordinance. And the second one is non-conforming uses. And that is, again, where we have houses that were residential properties that have commercial zoning to them, so, or vice versa, and all sorts of other anomalies to the zoning ordinance where it doesn't quite fit. So, and again, there is a whole series of regulations about the alteration of non-conforming development, dealing with variances and all sorts of things like that. So let's turn to the solar ordinance, and I'm going to. The solar ordinance was in its current configuration came from. It was originally adopted in December of 2020, and then amended in November of 2021. Let me briefly talk about the original ordinance. It had a table of offsets. It had not a table of offsets. It had a table of uses per district. In this particular case, it had four uses: accessory roof mounted solar energy systems, small energy systems, medium solar energy systems, and large. So those were the uses. And then you have the districts where they're permitted by special use permit or by right, or in the case of the large and medium solar by M, which is referring it to a process where it gets approval as a major land development review. And then, excuse me, and then solar ordinance. It lays out a purpose, and then it goes about talking about all the intensity requirements, all of the setbacks, all of the site design and so forth, all the parameters that we see in a zoning ordinance in Article 4 of the zone, Article 3 of the zoning ordinance, we see in the solar ordinance. So the solar ordinance then was amended in 2000, as I said, in November of 2021, and with three major amendments. One being that large and medium solar energy systems, which are the big ones that we sort of colloquially call solar farms, ground-mounted solar farms, it was amended so that they were prohibited in all residential districts. Number two, the yard setbacks were amended so that all parcels have 100-foot minimum setback on all sides and 150 foot a minimum setback on all sides that abut residentially zoned properties. And the third one was, in no case shall more than 20% of the area inclusive of inter-row panels and so forth be on cleared land. So those were the three principal and effective amendments to the solar ordinance. So we can proceed to talk about the impacts of those amendments and the ordinance as it stands today. My task, as you asked me to, and you'll see, let's go back to the zoning ordinance for a moment. The map, or the zoning map, if you will, Ray. There we go. So we have the ordinance as it stands now prohibits large and medium solar arrays in anything but the commercial, which is the red, the light industrial, which is the aqua color, and heavy industry, and which is the darker blue, and the waterfront district. So those are the only districts that are suitable for, or that where solar, large and medium solar energy systems are allowed through a development process, a permitting process. So my task was to apply the provisions of the amended solar ordinance to determine which parcels of land in Portsmouth are suitable for the development of large, medium ground mounted solar. And again, the two controlling provisions in the amended ordinance were large and medium solar systems are prohibited in all residential districts, and that yard setbacks are set at 100 feet, increased to 150 feet. As we'll see, the provision for the clearing of land turned out to be a moot point and does not affect where solar development can take place. Using the tax records, I found that a total of 33 parcels in the commercial, light industrial, heavy industry, and waterfront district zoning districts are vacant and suitable for large and medium solar systems. Of those 33, one of them is underwater half the time due to tidal flow. 2 parcels are in development under the old ordinance. 1 parcel is within the West Side Resort Development Area and is not likely to be developed as a solar farm. 1 parcel is in the waterfront district and it's currently being designed and developed. And then 2 parcels are on the Raytheon campus, which is kind of a non-starter. We don't really know what Raytheon may do or not do. And so they don't really fit in with these calculations very well. And then the last is by applying the yard setbacks per the ordinance, 22 parcels of this 33 by applying the setbacks, it squeezed it down to where there was zero or no property that was available. And it had the effect of removing all of the parcels in the commercial district from having any solar development take place in the future. This leaves a total of 4 parcels in Portsmouth that are vacant and suitable for development of large medium solar systems. All of these parcels are zoned light industry and are currently plowed farm fields. Now, I'm not going to I'll talk about them generally speaking, but I'm not going to identify these parcels. I think that their property owners deserve a measure of privacy for their property ownership. So of the four parcels, 2 are surrounded on all sides by residential, 2 are surrounded on 2 sides by residential and 2 sides by light industry. If we parcel 1, it's 14 acres, and if we apply the appropriate yard setbacks, it leaves approximately 5 acres or 36% of that parcel that's available to the owner for him to develop a solar farm. Parcel 2 is 43 acres. Applying the appropriate yard setbacks leaves him with 19 acres to 44% of his property available for solar development. Parcel 3, 60% of his parcel is available for solar development, and excuse me, parcel 4, 66% of the part of his parcel is available for solar development if we apply the setbacks accordingly. So collectively, these 4 parcels are, by applying the zoning ordinance as it's written now, these 4 parcels, these property owners have essentially 50% of the property that they own is available to do solar development if they see fit. So that's the impact of the ordinance. That's what's in the ordinance. That's the impact of the ordinance as it stands today. And I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Are there any questions from the town council? Are there any members of the audience that wish to ask Mr. Crosby any questions? Would you come to the podium? Just for the record, if you could state your name and your address. Thank you.
Richard Munch, 775 Union Street. My first question is, I printed out this proposal on the draft, Mr. Crosby, and have the setbacks been increased to 200 feet? Or
No, they have not. They were amended to increase to 100 feet on all on all parcels, and 150 feet on all parcels that abut residential property.
Okay, so this thing that I'm looking at here that says 200 feet, is that another proposed change to increase it from 150 to 200? I don't know where this came from.
I'm not sure that, that is proposed amendments to the original ordinance. And they were not, that particular piece was not adopted. The original ordinance was 50 feet.
Right.
And then the amendment increased it to 100 feet all around and 150 feet to residential property. So that was the original proposal for amending the ordinance that was adopted back in 2021.
Okay, and then so that wasn't accepted. That was brought back down to 150.
Correct.
Okay.
It was brought back down to 50. And then it was amended, it was increased to 100 and 150 feet.
Okay. The second question I have, and I don't know if I should direct this to Mr. Crosby. I think he gave us his opinion on it, but these 4 parcels that have been identified, to me, that should be public record as to where they are. I don't know if that can be just not mentioned where they are or what. I don't know if someone needs to make a comment about, are we going to keep that a secret as to where these things are? Or are we going to know where they are?
I believe we have our town solicitor on. Mr. Gavin? No?
I mean, just as a comment, if I was, all of these places have residential abutters. And I know if I was a resident of one of these potential areas, and they're all big, I'd like to know. And I'd like to know now. And I think those people deserve that information.
Mr. Gavin, would you like to address this?
I mean, it's public record that anyone could figure this out. And from looking at doing the research that Gary did, Gary thought it was appropriate not to identify the particular parcels, but there's nothing confidential about that. It is public record and nothing that prevents the identification of those parcels.
Okay, I guess my question then would be, is it legal for the town of Portsmouth to withhold that information? I mean, to me, what you just said kind of bugs me, to be quite honest with you. Like we're talking about these 4 parcels, but we don't have the right as citizens in the town to know where these are. We have to like research it ourselves.
I'm not suggesting anything. I mean, probably just to short circuit this, if Gary, if you have the map and lot numbers, why don't you just say what they are?
And if I may, Madam President,
Yes, Mr.
I would
Councilman.
ask this question slightly differently, as if a member of the public were to file an Access to Public Records Act request for the information, would we by law have to provide it? And if the answer is yes, then we should just not have to make people go through those hoops because it will become public anyway. I appreciate Mr. Crosby's sensibilities on person's privacy, but nonetheless, we're talking about zoning and issues, and it's a matter of public record. So if I could ask that question, would Mr. Gavin, if someone were to file an Access to Public Records Act, does this fall within any sort of exception where we would be able to withhold it?
Well, I mean, the Public Records Act, you request copies of records, and I mean, if they said request copies of the tax assessor maps and plats that are sufficient to, you know, to what Gary just described, it would not be exempt from the Public Records Act. I mean, I think it's probably best just to, if Gary has the information, just identify the map and lot numbers. It's not, there's no confidentiality. I mean, Gary did this research, and I think it was, I understand his reason for not identifying these parcels, but there is no exemption from public records. It's not private. All it is saying that identifying certain lots that have the characteristics and size that would allow a solar project. So
just to summarize.
Nothing preventing disclosure of the particular parcels.
Thank you.
Okay, well, given that is the opinion of our town solicitor, then I would ask Mr. Crosby to identify the properties.
I would harken back to what I said originally, that the zoning goes both ways, that the property owners who abut these parcels have equally, the owners of these property have equal property rights to the people who abut them. And so I'm not going to disclose those parcels tonight. If you want to send in a FOIA request, to me, It would be, well, if you want to send in a FOIA request, I'd be happy to disclose the 33 parcels that fall under the category of being suitable for solar development in the town of Portsmouth, according to zoning, and I will disclose those, and somebody can do the research that I did in order to the work product that I did to find that out. I'd be happy to do that.
All right, well, my suggestion is that you give us a couple weeks to, till the next meeting to make sure that we are proceeding properly. I feel like we need to make sure that the work product exception is not something that prevents us from submitting or making this information public.
Perhaps.
I don't know. And I hesitate to make that call on the
I
fly.
don't know either, but I really firmly believe that these property owners need to have the protection of their property rights and their privacy coming out of my office.
Well, there's always a balancing act, Mr. Crosby, and I believe that what makes sense is to not make once we let this cat out of the bag, that's it.
Yeah.
And if we are wrong, we can't put that back. So I would recommend that we give it a couple weeks to make sure that our, all the legal analyses have been done. And then if we are able to, I believe that an APRA request is being made right now. And you don't have to ever answer an APRA request instantly.
Correct.
So it would make sense for us to take a few days at least to analyze this, and then we respond to the APRA request as we would in any case. So that's what I would recommend. If folks would prefer not to do that, I suppose you could make a motion and overrule, but okay, then thank you for raising those concerns. I believe that we will have the answer for you certainly by the next town council meeting.
Okay. Can I continue with?
Sure.
a few other things? As you know, I was involved with the Union Street, West Main Road solar project there under the original ordinance. And, that went on and on and on, and we finally got that turned down. And I'm here tonight, to be quite honest with you, to help residential homeowners in the future when these proposals come up. I know during the time that we were dealing with the West Main Road Union Street project, myself and other people that worked with us, I don't know, we felt that we were on our own. It was, people that lived nearby, the gas station people and Namali Power had 2 law firms working on their side. And we fought that without the use of lawyers, and we were successful. The price we paid was, we put a lot of time into that. And we put a lot of effort into it. And we basically were on our own. And I'll be quite honest with you, during that period of time, I didn't feel that we were getting much support from town committees or whatever you want to talk about it. And I think we fought tooth and nail for what we did. And I saw the same thing happen, probably an even more prolonged thing with the solar project that got approved across from Melville School, which I have a lot of issues with, but that's not what I'm here for tonight. I want you to understand that the reason I'm here tonight is to try to clarify some things that would help abutters to these possible projects in the future. So having said that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through the ordinance and ask a few questions, make a couple comments about things that I should be added. I don't know if Mr. Crosby wants to respond to this, but I'll throw it out and you guys can tell me where it goes. I'm on page 2 of the solar ordinance, starting on line 26. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it basically says energy facilities are encouraged to be located on rooftops, so on and so forth. And what I'm asking for is, in addition to that, and this is from, I got this and we brought this up at the planning meetings and everything.
Mr. Munch, just real quickly,
Yeah.
before we get too far.
Okay,
It's not a public hearing in order to change the ordinance. So we can't change the ordinances tonight. You can make some suggestions. I just want to make sure we don't go outside of the realm of what the established agenda item is. You can make comments to it. Requesting changes tonight wouldn't happen. You can make requests
can I,
and we can have a public hearing in the future, but I just don't
Okay.
want you to. I want you to understand. I want to make sure we don't go
okay,
too far outside the
I'll
agenda.
keep
item.
it real brief to the
No, I
things.
don't, you can speak
All
as
right.
long as you want. I just don't want to make sure we don't.
See, I was under the impression you guys set up a 6-month moratorium.
Correct.
And during that period of time, unless I'm wrong, you were going to set up a workshop with the planning board to talk about the solar policy. And that was supposed to occur during that 6-month moratorium. So I don't know what happened to that. I don't want to get into the details of who and
Neither do I. But-
why that was changed, but
And again, even
I
on-
kind of thought that tonight was in lieu of that, so we could make some comments.
you can make comments. I just
Okay.
want you, I just want to let you know that we can't make changes to the ordinance without going through the whole process again of advertising the ordinance, having a hearing, sending it to the planning board, and then coming back to a public hearing for town council.
Right.
Okay,
But
so,
but you can present your questions and your suggestions. I think.
okay, I
So
will,
Go
but-
ahead.
Can I actually just clarify something? Because we discussed this at our last council meeting, and I think it was not clear when we put in those 4 changes to the ordinance. Is at the same time that we put in the moratorium, the 6-month moratorium, we also passed 3 pretty significant changes to the zoning ordinance. Those, with or without a workshop, are now permanent unless we go through another hearing process and go through the process of changing the ordinance. So we discussed it here in the council, and we all felt that those changes addressed the 3 major issues that folks seem to have with the ordinance, and that we wanted to keep them in place. But that said, you are welcome to bring forward additional comments and suggestions. And if it comes to it, then we'll have to go through the process of a hearing again.
so you guys decided amongst yourselves not to have the workshop with the planning board?
Even with the workshop, changes that a workshop wouldn't have been made, it would still have to go through that same process.
Okay, well, I'll make a quick comment about that.
Yeah,
No.
I just don't want you to have the hopes that you're going to say, I want to change.
No, okay, then I won't bring up any of it then, but
No, no,
you-
you
you
should.
can.
You
Okay.
should.
I don't want you to have the hope that next meeting, we're going to change the ordinance. If the council all nods their head, it's just, that's not how it works.
All right.
That's all.
I do think it's important that you do identify what
Okay.
you want.
one last thing before I do. I thought it was a really good idea to have that workshop, to be quite honest with you, because I was looking forward to being in this room with the planning board and you guys to talk about that current ordinance and changes that they would like to see, in addition to people like me wanting certain changes. I don't know how, I know some of you were at, some of those planning board meetings. They were intense. They were stressful for everyone. There's been a number of changes on that planning board. And they were pretty heated meetings. And I think the town council would really benefit by hearing some of those accounts and listening to the planning board. They might not have any suggestions at all. But if I was on that planning board, I'd be here and I'd be saying to the town council, look, we need this, and this put into that ordinance because, don't forget, we worked under that first ordinance. And that, well, I won't get into comments about that, but that first ordinance put, in my opinion, on just too much pressure on that planning board to make decisions. That's a volunteer board. And because of the ambiguity and poor things that were in that ordinance, a lot of pressure was put on those people. In addition to, abutters in that immediate area. And at times, I felt really bad for some of those people on the planning board, to be quite honest with you. And I think that needs to be addressed. We've got this group, which comes up with the plan. And then you got the planning board who has to deal with it. And I don't know, and I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just saying, I don't know how much communication there is between the town council and the planning board. It's a big issue. And, with electric rates going up and everything else, in my opinion, it's going to continue to be a big issue in this town. So anyways.
Right, thank you. I think just to summarize, we believe that we will have what is going to be a public hearing if what happens at the next town council meeting is that recommended changes are brought before the town council and we'll discuss it there. It's not like we're never going to discuss these things. We're not calling it a workshop. We're calling it you're coming to town council and asking for these changes and we're going to have a hearing. So it's going to happen. And we really would like to hear your questions and comments because tonight
Is it more appropriate if I wait until you have that meeting?
I think that we could wait, but frankly, I would like to hear what you have to say. You're here tonight and you've
Okay,
prepared.
I'll keep it real brief. And once again, my intention here is to help future abutters to some of these big problems, things that I personally experienced or saw during all these meetings. All right, the first one on the zoning ordinance, I'm on page 2. And I don't want to read the whole thing, but it's about, putting them in contaminated areas, quarries, parking lots, and things like that. And I'm referring to the DEM ground-mounted solar array guidance. And I'm proposing to add a sentence to that paragraph that would say, the clearing of forests and other green spaces, including farmlands, for the siting for ground-mounted solar arrays is strongly discouraged.
All right. What version of the ordinance are you on? Because there was some language change to the clearing of lots in terms of wooded areas. So I just want to make sure are you on
Yeah,
1214?
I'm on the one that I printed off of, I got a million of them, but
The one that was adopted on 1214?
the one that's listed up here.
There's 2 listed on there. There's May 11th and then there's December 14th. So it should be on the top.
Yeah. So that's the December
This is the
14th.
one that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Just
Okay.
want to make sure. Okay.
Okay. So anyways, that's one thing I would add. I'm going to go by page 3. It's just a couple things. All right, there's one on page 4. I guess it begins on line 21. I'm just going to read part of a sentence. It says, visually screen the installation from view of public roads and adjoining properties. My question on that is, and this is what we experienced, when this is built or 10 years down the line, when the trees that are put in are tall enough to screen it. It's ambiguous. That was a big issue with what we brought up. And it's open to interpretation and it's a gray area. And to me, it should be immediate from the start, which, brings up the philosophical question generally of, should any Portsmouth residential homeowner, if these things are put in, ever have to look from their yard or from their house? Should they be looking at thousands of solar panels? And I think that's a question everyone has to have in their mind. It's like, I fought tooth and nail on that, because if that project had gone in on West Main Road, and I'm not in a butter, but if that project had gone in on West Main Road, my western view would be total solar panels. So, I'm just saying that's something that we need to think about. And I'm going to jump over to, I guess, page 6. Yeah, okay. Down at the very bottom where it says site design, general siting.
This was the original, those were proposed amendments.
So this would be different pages.
Mhm.
Site control. All right, I don't even need to. Site. Where would this be? Site design. Oh, it's right here. There it is. Right. Yeah, all right, just under general siting, there's no mention about wells. People's wells. And the DEM guidance basically says avoid placement of solar arrays in the vicinity of public and private wells. And I just think that needs to be mentioned somehow in the ordinance, because it's not.
Okay.
And let's see, I'll keep this quick. The other thing was, and I don't know how specific this was, but water runoff. The only thing that I see in the current ordinance is stormwater erosion control subject to soil erosion and sediment control provisions of the subdivision and land development regulations. I don't know if there should be some more specific statement about water runoff from these projects. That was a major topic that we covered on the Union Street one. And, I think that needs to be a little bit better specified. And let's see, I'll finish up. I'm taking too much time. The other thing is, and this was kind of an area, we never got an answer to this. Once these facilities are put in and they're up and running, and there's a problem, who does a residential owner appeal to? We never got an answer to that.
You'd have to define the problem, I would think.
Okay, let's say the Union Street one was put in. There's major erosion problems. I pick up a phone, who do I call? Who's going to come from the town to check that out? And there's a lot of other issues. Trees are put in and they die. Different things like that. A lot of noise comes out of it, so on and so forth. We brought those questions up No one knew the answer to those questions. So basically, I think the way it stands now is, if these things are put in and there's problems, who's overseeing that? And, my suggestion is that maybe these companies put up a certain amount of money and the town hires an engineer or someone qualified to inspect these on a certain basis and have a kind of a hotline number for, people that abut these things to call with concerns, because these companies certainly have enough money to hire lawyers to fight for them to get these things put in. They should have enough money to put up to have, some kind of overseer that's hired, that's neutral, that can keep an eye on these things. Because I don't think, and I'm not asking you or Mr. Crosby for any answer to that, because I don't think any of you know it. And I think that's something that going, in the future, that needs to be talked about. And I'll stop. If we have another meeting, I'll be there to talk about it again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think what Mr. Aguirre usually does is there's someone else. Well, before we get to you, does anyone on the town council have any questions for the speaker?
No, I mean,
Okay.
there are channels where, and soil erosion and runoff would go into the zoning office.
Right.
So there are channels to do this. If you go back to an original planning board and zoning board site design master plan approval, and they weren't according to, the trees or whatever, site setbacks, that would also probably go through the zoning office, as well as the inspector who would go after that. To answer some of your questions about who would enforce that. And you'd have to go back and look for the stormwater and soil erosion control. You'd have to reference that back to the existing ordinance that exists for everybody, whether you're putting in a new house or you're putting in a new development.
One other thing, and then I'll stop. I forgot about this one. We had to deal with the forested area. The one on Union Street was 100% forested. We were under the original ordinance, and it was the applicant shall utilize existing clear land or that which minimizes impact on forest and habitat. Well, they were going to totally wipe out the forested area there. And, we stressed that we didn't have the 20% and the 20,000 square feet. That's a major addition. But when we originally brought that up, a member on the planning board, their response to us was, well, the people putting in that application, they could go in there the day before, clear cut the whole area, and then apply for the solar ordinance. The solar application. So basically, in the beginning, I think we changed minds as time went on. But in the beginning, that was poo-pooed. That was like, yeah, forested area, big deal. They can cut it out beforehand. And I couldn't believe it. So during the process of everything that we did, I kind of looked around in other towns and stuff. And some towns have a thing about clearing forested areas that if they're cleared, solar development can't be put on it for 5 years. Just saying, if we're really sincere about protecting forested areas in town, something like that should be added, as far as I'm concerned. Look what happened. I don't want to bellyache about it and stuff, but look at what happened with the one across from Melville. That's a forested area. I've walked through that a bunch of times. I don't know if you know the history of the land or whatever, but that's a total forested area. That was approved. Those trees are coming down. Something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there's someone else who wants to ask questions or make a comment. Would you come to the podium and identify yourself? And I have to say, just in general, everyone, I really respect anyone who takes the time and the effort to research issues and come and speak before the town council. I thank you for that. It's not, it's not your job, and you're a concerned person who wants to make your concerns known. So thank you.
Yeah, my name is Robert Hale, H-E-H-L. I live at 815 Union Street. 2 points I wanted to make. And this was something that really put the planning board at a disadvantage, as Mr. Munch had pointed out, the incredible stress they were put under because of ambiguity in the ordinance specifically. 2 points I want to make. One is, what do we mean by minimal? Because it literally took me and others going through and pulling the engineering report that the applicant had submitted that clearly stated 100% of that forested area was going to be, the habitat was going to be impacted. That's what it took for the planning board to say, okay, that's where we go over the line. And I think that's ridiculous. So is there, for engineering purposes or building purposes, is there a clearly defined definition of what do we mean by minimal? Likewise, when we use the term screened, again, it was, well, it won't be when they build it, but 5 or 7 years down the road, when the plants are all grown in, then everything will be blocked. Well, what do we mean by screened? Does that mean I'm still going to see solar panels from my property, or somebody else will see that from their property? Again, these two things, the ambiguity is what we have to get it right this time. This is what we have to fix, because that not only puts our officials at a disadvantage for truly knowing what their authorities are, but it also gives those people who are not in the best interest of our town to work the system, to manipulate the system. Like Mr. Munch pointed out, it was mentioned, oh yeah, well, you know what, they can go in and clear cut the whole lot and then come in with the application. Again, it's what is the true intent for what the ordinance means, what we're trying to achieve? Because there are folks, we all know that they don't have the town of interest's, a town of Portsmouth's best interest in mind. Theirs is one of economics and profit. And I totally understand that there's a balance, but again, we need to get rid of this ambiguity. We need to be, when we say minimal, we need to have a clear definition. What is minimal? When we say screened, do we mean can't see it? Does it mean during the winter time, when all the leaves are gone, the trees being in the way, that's sufficient? Because that's what lawyers for applicants they're going to go and they're going to use that. And in a court of law, they may very well win. So I would just ask you all in any future modifications that, you really look at this to get the ambiguities out, so that, what we mean, we say what we say is, we understand what it is.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Hale. I think with your 2 suggestions and Mr. Munch's 7 suggestions, we have a total of 9 possible amendments to an ordinance, which, no one would argue is perfect. And we often have to amend laws as we learn more. And so what I'm suspecting is that we will have the planning officials look at these suggestions and bring them to the town council as the first step. And we will address these.
And just one other point, Mr. Munch asked a question about, well, what happens once these are put in? What's the enforcement mechanism?
Right.
We were told, you're the enforcement mechanism, because once they go through literally we were told, once they go through the planning process, once the applications are all approved and everything is in, the town is finished. It's now a civil matter between the property owner and the developer. So that's a big concern. Obviously, when we're talking something like Namali Power versus a private citizen, and who has the deeper pockets. So just so you understand, because we were all at those meetings, that was the message that I received. You're on your own.
No, thank you for that point.
Yeah.
So is there, yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Just let us know who you are and where you live.
I'm Robin Yunkin and I live at 49 West Passage Drive. I'm one of those neighbors in Portsmouth who's going to have to look out our window and look at a solar array because I live near Melville and my property just is very close. So I'm going to be looking at that and I'm dreading the day. And one of the reasons that that array went in is because the town kicked the can down the road and delayed making decisions. If it had made decisions earlier, I don't think that array would be there. So I'm urging you not to keep putting this off meeting after meeting. I've been going to meetings for almost 3 years now. And it's very frustrating. I'm here too for the neighbors of the future who might have to deal with this issue. When Mr. Crosby refused to identify those pieces of property, I don't want to know the names of the people who own them, but I'd like to know where they are. I don't think it's any great violation of anyone's privacy to know where that land is. And that is the kind of resistance that we've met all along in this fight against the solar ordinance. It's infuriating to tell you the truth. And I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling that way. Many of us are here. We've been here meeting after meeting at the planning board and in front of you also. Some people are not here because they've given up, they've sold their houses and they've moved. And I would rather have those good people living next to me than having to look at a solar array. So I hope that you act quickly, that you don't just rubber stamp this thing, that you really take a good look at it, maybe even hire an engineer, because I know that I'm guessing that none of you are experts on solar and you might want to contact an expert to get to understand and to get rid of the ambiguity that is in the ordinance as it is. So I guess that's my piece.
Thank you, Ms. Yonkin.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes.
Evening. Lark Roderick, 73 West Passage Drive. I also am in a butter to the new solar farm that's going in. And I was given 50 feet setback. I clawed and I begged and I came to every meeting and I got an extra 20 feet. I'll be 70 feet from it. I appreciate all the work that you've done and the changes you've made, but it's far from adequate. I have to tell you that if you add up the acreage of these 4 parcels, it's unbelievable. It doesn't sound like much, 4 parcels. And I think if I didn't have any experience with solar, I'd think that's nothing. We don't have anything to worry about. But when you talk about 60% of a huge farm that abuts residential property, residents that are going to be surprised because I tried to get the map. I wanted to go to those neighborhoods and tell people, you need to be at this meeting because what will happen to you happened to me. They need to know. They have a right to know. It's infuriating to me that people have to watch out their windows and not be protected. So I was looking forward to the forum. I was ready, I was willing, and I was able to volunteer or do whatever. But when the room was empty and I was here alone, I was looked at and told there will be no forum. When the room was full, there was a forum, but when the room was empty, they said there was no forum. So I started to research in other towns, and I went to our neighbors next door in Tiverton because I knew that they had the same exact problem we had. They had lost a beloved farm of 60 acres, Wingover Farm, to solar. It infuriated the town so much that they made them rewrite the solar ordinance. They rewrote it twice. People were not happy. 150 feet from a solar industrial plant at 60 acres was not enough for them. I started to go to the meetings of a committee that was formed. It was formed by people on the boards and volunteers, a lawyer, just somebody who lived in the neighborhood. And it was twice a week for the 6 months of their moratorium. They're going to submit it now to Scott Millar for him to check before they hand it over to the town council and the zoning board. I can only tell you that you do not even know what to put in the solar ordinance because you are not solar experts. So they invited experts to come and work on it. There were things that were spent hours on that our solar ordinance did not even mention. And I can foresee so many problems because I went to those meetings of things that we have not covered. It's a big deal. I'm curious about if a neighborhood has the protection and do they even deserve it? Or is this actually planned so that these big areas will not become something else industrial and that this town thinks that solar is the best we can do? I wonder about that. It was almost like before it even started, the solar was going to go in near me. It was like everyone wanted it there. I don't understand. I just wanted to mention that none of us are experts. I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to be. But for the town to not admit that they're not experts on solar is a crime. That's where the problem came from. That's where my 50-foot setback came from. Somebody who pretended to know about solar and didn't. I am not pretending I know about it, but I do know that the experts have better advice and will cover more than what's in our ordinance. I just wish that you could see these people in Tiverton going over these details and how important it is to get it right for them. I've always thought of Portsmouth as heads above. I was blown away at what they were doing, the commitment to do that. And to say that if we do it over, it has to go back and forth. Well, maybe that's the way it should be. I think that moving ahead to try to keep solar in the right place is what everybody wishes for. And I know that Portsmouth is part of the future and solar will be here. I'd like to suggest that we look at it from another angle and think about putting solar where it belongs, like on public buildings and in parking lots, like at the high school, where the town actually benefits from it being here. And it doesn't take away from what the comprehensive plan calls the rural character of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodrigues. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? Sure.
Good evening. Louis Latendra, 94 Sweet Farm Road. Thanks for hearing me tonight. I'm also in a butter to my friend Lark and some of my neighbors, and we're worried about what we're going to see back there. I appreciate some of the feedback. This has been a long process, and I appreciate we've been going back and forth and had some spicy meetings. And I think we've made some progress. Daniela, when you said, and I appreciate, a lot of the things that you've done, Danielle. I didn't understand your comments about when you said there were some things that were decided and that were already done. What were those?
I'm just going to go back to, I think it was last November. we put in a proposal to make some changes to the ordinance. The planning board reviewed them and didn't agree with any of them. And so it was back on us. And that's when the moratorium came up and we put up the moratorium.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't recall exactly what I said at the time, but the intention was basically okay, it's because we couldn't put the moratorium the week that we were actually considering the changes. So until we could actually introduce a moratorium, we approved 3 key changes to the ordinance, which was 1, that it's not allowed in any residential zone, which I think is a huge win for the intended, direction that we want to take this solar ordinance. 2 was increasing the setbacks from 50 feet to 100 or 150, depending on whether it's abutting residential or not. And the 3rd was the preventing the clear cutting of forested lands. So those 3 changes we voted on and approved, and they are part of the ordinance now permanently. 2 weeks later, we came back and then put the moratorium in place for 6 months. And so that's where we are now. The moratorium has now expired. The changes that we approved are now permanent in the ordinance. The reality of it is that the planning board didn't agree with those changes.
Right.
And if I recall, they didn't think that they needed to do a workshop with us. So, my honest opinion is that those 3 changes achieved a lot of the intended results that we wanted from the solar ordinance. And I do think a lot of the other stuff, all these suggestions that we brought up are excellent. And I think there's a lot of truth to what you said, that there's a lot of room for improvement in our ordinance. So where we go from here is really, up to us.
So there will be more discussions about ordinance?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that the door is not closed. We just
Okay.
have to go through the proper processes
Okay.
to put forward new changes to the ordinance.
But this solar array that's going up behind us will not be affected by that in any way, right? They're under the old ordinance,
Yeah, because they had been approved prior to any changes to the ordinance.
but there was several conversations on the way. Why were they allowed to go ahead and vote that through before these new recommendations were?
Because by state law, they were grandfathered in under the original ordinance, and you're not allowed to change the rules halfway through it
But
on anybody.
I understand
Or
that,
any
but
ordinance.
why was the ordinance changed in the first place? Why did they go ahead and revote the ordinance? Remember, there was some noise and some articles that came out in the paper and,
The original. Because
because it was during the pandemic,
We're gonna
right?
go back to 2019.
Yeah.
Right, or 2020, I guess it's 2020. I may go too far. The original ordinance was put forward, was sent to the planning board. They had 2 public hearings on it. There was very little comment at that point in time. It came to us in May of 2020.
2020.
Excuse me, March of 2020. It was voted on by the council.
Right.
There was very little public input then. Ms. Abbott and I both made some changes to it. I believe Mr. Grebe was the only one who was in the room who made, or I can't remember. It wasn't in the room. It was probably online at Zoom at that point.
Right.
Out of the abundance of caution, because of the way things happened with the pandemic and advertising and people possibly not being aware of it, we put it back on in November, had a meeting and voted it back in. And then we had a second chance when most of you folks came in and said, this is too tight or too small. Since they were, and Mr. Gavin's on here, I believe, since they were a part of that original ordinance and they already had the master plan approval, you can't go back and change can't move the goalposts on, basically.
To me, that didn't seem like like the approval process was legit at that time, because, and that's why, I thought that's why Mr. Gavin had said, okay, not everybody understood it because of the pandemic. Not everybody was listening, and there was a lot of people that were not aware of this ordinance going forward. So I thought that because of that the developer would have to go with the new ordinance and the new. but no.
Not from what we've been told. I'm giving you
Yeah. I
the best
understand.
layman's term I can. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, a lot of us, try to make, we're worried because we want more than 50 feet, obviously from our property lines. I mean, I'm right in the corner. I'm gonna be, I don't know how many feet, but I don't know what we end up with that ordinance. Is that
150 abutting residential right now.
That
it's pretty-
now it is, but not with the one that's going to be
Yeah,
behind you.
the old one was.
It's 50, right? That's pretty close. But, that's too bad. So for the new people, I guess for other solar arrays in town, that will be benefit. So it's nice that that'll be, that they'll get the benefit of that. I think that there's going to be a lot of people in our neighborhood that are going to really be shocked when they see that 50 feet from their property, because it's all of Sweet Farm Road. It's the whole block. And I visited every house in the neighborhood, and I know Lark has too. And there's going to be some shocked people in that neighborhood. I don't know what else to say, but thank you, and I appreciate your time, but, hopefully we learn something from it.
Thank you.
Before I sit down.
Is there anyone else who, yes?
Richard Munch, 775 Union Street. Just to clarify, it's a question. Which town meeting are we going to find out where those 4 lots are? Don't you guys have a meeting on the 15th, 2 days from
Yeah,
now?
but that's already advertised, so we can't change it.
Oh, so it'll be the one after that?
State law wouldn't allow us to do that because that's already advertised. That's 48
Do
hours,
we know what the date is?
2 weeks from today.
2
So
weeks
that's
from
the
today.
27th.
Okay.
If my math is right,
Yeah.
27th.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Robin Yunkin, West Passage Drive. I just have a really quick question. If the town, if a developer gets approval to put in a solar array and the town is fine with it, can that developer then sell those rights to another company?
I would defer to our town solicitor to answer whether that travels with the land. Oops. He is.
Yeah, yes, it does.
Kevin, for how long? So
Oh.
I know there's been projects that have been approved, but then weren't
Oh.
acted upon. It's not, and not specifically solar ordinances,
Right.
solar
Right,
projects.
right. If there's a zoning ordinance generally provides that that if a permit is not acted upon within a year, it expires, and there's provisions about applying for extensions. I think you can get 2 one-year extensions. But generally speaking, a zoning approval, it runs with the particular land, not the particular owner. So I mean, someone could sell the land and they would have the same rights. In other words, if a zoning board approves something, you can't say, well, this just applies to this particular owner and disappears if the property is sold. So zoning runs with the land, generally speaking.
But generally speaking, after 365 days from approval, if they don't apply for an extension or act upon that approval,
Right.
it goes away.
It expires, but I mean, yes.
And they would have to go through the whole process again.
Which would put them under the new ordinance, not
Right.
the old one.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Vice President, I think it might be helpful if somebody could just very roughly outline what the formal process for submitting a change to a zoning ordinance is, because I think I know, but I'm not sure everybody's on the same page. What does one do if they have recommendations for changes to a zoning ordinance?
Good question. I will toss that into Mr. Gavin's court.
Okay.
You're
You're
muted.
muted now. There you go.
You gotta unmute.
Unmute.
There you go.
The process for adopting and amending a zoning ordinance is set forth in Article 15 of our zoning ordinance, which follows the requirements of Rhode Island General Laws 45-24-51 of the Rhode Island Zoning Enabling Act, and it's specified in there. So generally, anyone can propose an amendment to a zoning ordinance. It goes to the clerk's office, who sends it to the town planner, the town planning board, which in turn seeks consultation with the planning department of the town. It's studied by the planning board with the assistance of the town planners, and the planning board makes a recommendation as to whether or not they think it's a good idea for the proposed amendment. And then a hearing is scheduled before the town council, and it goes to the town council, which is the legislative authority that has the power to decide whether or not to adopt an amendment. And that's what we went through last year.
So in that case, sorry, Dana, in that case, similar to what happened last year, the planning board took no action for the changes that were put forth by Ms. Abbott. It came back to the town council, and the town council strengthened it a little bit.
Well, the planning board, the process with it's required by statute is the planning board studies it and makes recommendations, but the ultimate legislative authority is the town council.
One question. So any, I guess, person or resident of Portsmouth can submit recommended changes to the town clerk. Those always get sent to the planning board. The planning board studies it, writes up their recommendation, and then whether they agree with them or disagree with them, it ultimately comes to the town council for either approval of denial or denial of the changes.
And the person applying for a zoning amendment is responsible for the notice and advertising component of it.
So a private individual in Portsmouth, if they want to recommend a change to the zoning ordinance, has to pay for the advertisement out of their own pocket?
That's what state law requires.
Well,
I mean,
that does, okay, just playing devil's advocate here, because how we ended up with this, this ordinance is that a, private landowner hired a lawyer to put in the ordinance and submit it, and clearly had a commercial vested interest in getting this passed. I don't think it's appropriate that our private residents have to pay out of pocket for if they want to see a change to the zoning ordinance. So what's the alternative?
well, that's what exactly what you did last year. The council proposed an amendment and sent it.
Okay.
That's
In
the
that case,
workaround.
I would recommend that
Yeah.
any changes that any member of the audience has, they want to recommend to the zoning ordinance, get submitted to a town council member to then put forward for consideration
That would place the burden of paying for the advertising on the town.
on the town rather than on the individual,
Correct,
which is the same process we went through in October or November of last year.
exactly.
All right.
We
Thank
did-
you for
and-
clarifying.
But I can see why the public is very confused, because if we are the ones, the town council makes a recommendation to the planning board, but the planning board doesn't endorse that recommendation and gives us not what we're recommending, and it's coming back to us to overrule them. It just, it doesn't, that-
Council, the legislative power to adopt or amend a zoning ordinance is the city or town council of any municipality. And the statute spells out the process that has to be followed. And part of that process is referral to the planning board to study and make a recommendation. That's the process.
And that's exactly what happened twice last year.
Correct.
Is we had to go through the same suggestions through two different avenues until we ultimately overruled the planning board's recommendation.
and I think what the complaint is that because this process is written the way it is, it got delayed. And that delay allowed, projects to go forward that could have been stopped if we had not had this weird process where
You
it
couldn't have
came to
stopped.
us,
It's
it
already
went to them, it came back to us, and then it became, well, if it had just come to us and we could have decided it, or if we said, well, I think this state law has to be changed.
Well,
That's a
To
different
say-
problem.
That's a whole different problem, but it is confusing to require that the town council act not only as the judge, but also as the plaintiff. Right? That is a weird situation, and that's what we're being asked to do, unless I'm
I don't
completely
know how we're acting
misunderstanding.
as a judge or a plaintiff.
We are
We're-
acting as judge because we as a group have to vote to approve or not approve the ordinance changes. We are acting as the plaintiff
We're
because of
acting
we
as a
as.
legislative body, not a plaintiff or a judge.
But we were just told that if the townspeople were to suggest a change, they have to pay for advertising.
That's.
And so to get around that, it could be that the town council recommends to the planning board the change that the folks out here wanted, and that way they wouldn't have to pay for the change. So I'm saying, to me, that seems like we would be acting as plaintiff. And when it comes back to us, we're acting as judge. It's just very confusing, and
You're-
I'd be happy to hear how
You're
that
not-
makes sense.
I would say you're more doing constituent services rather than being a plaintiff.
Okay,
Because
well,
it's changing an ordinance, it's not adjudicating the ordinance.
okay,
Okay,
perhaps.
It's just, there's a lot of things that are tightened up. There's different wording in there that have changed. There's a lot of leeway for the planning board. Leeway goes both ways. If you specifically state that you have to put in a 10-foot arborvitae fence all the way around the property, that's what you're going to get, is a 10-foot arborvitae fence. But if you put in the wording, and I have to go back and pull it up again, I'm sorry. And I have to make it a lot bigger. Excuse me for a second. The new wording gives the buffer areas and screening, natural vegetation or additional landscape screening shall be provided as determined by the zoning board of review or planning board, depending on the existing land use on the site and the adequacy of the site's natural vegetation or lack thereof to mitigate impacts of public views, scenic roads, and abutters. The zoning board of review, planning board shall have the authority to set site-specific width of buffers, heights, plants, or at planting, or to require an opaque screen to adjacent properties and or public roads. If required by the zoning board of review or planning board, the landscape plan shall be prepared by a registered landscape architect. If we were to go in there and change that to say it has to be a 10-foot picket fence.
I don't think that's what, I
But
understand that.
I'm just saying, you don't want to narrow it down so much that you tie the hands of the planning board. as well.
Absolutely. I think
That's-
people in
and
the
this is-
audience would agree to that, but you can put in standards that are not going to tie their hands.
Understood, and I don't
There's something
think this ties
between
their
those two
hands.
extremes.
But I don't think this ties your hands. And I'm cautioning everyone to not get so specific that you do tie their hands.
Right. I don't believe that anybody has, that's a fair statement, certainly. I don't think that that was specifically what I heard being recommended, but.
No, but I'm
um,
just.
It's a concern.
General comment
Yes.
that we don't want to make, we want to make sure that we don't make everybody on the zoning board or the planning board and put in the zoning ordinance that every deck has to be purple.
No, understood. I
Right?
think
And
at the
that's the extreme
extremes, yes, at the,
Example, but we want to make sure.
right, at the extremes, there's no question. I think it's the gray areas that we're in, and the people are just suggesting that there be a bit more criteria laid out so that the planning board is not forced to make decisions without guidance.
But that's
and-
part of the planning board's job, and why we have them is to have that ability. And that's why they do it on a daily basis. We make the ordinances, they interpret the ordinances and make it fit each individual property and project.
Yes, I agree. I don't think anybody disagrees with what you're saying, Mr. Hamilton. I just believe that they're suggesting that the ordinance can be improved, and that's,
I think every ordinance can be improved. I'm just,
well,
again. I'm
we
just
are
going
talking
back
about
to-
this ordinance,
I
and
understand.
so I do
I just
appreciate
caution
everyone's.
not to be too specific.
Yeah,
Fair
but-
enough.
But that's been the discussion tonight is several of the public have had problems because there are clear ambiguities in the ordinance as written. But you're making the excellent point that you want to clear up the ambiguities so that gross violations of the intent of the ordinance are not committed. But at the same time, you don't want to make it so specific that it requires rigid actions to be taken in every situation. And that's sometimes is a very narrow path to walk. So
It is.
So I think, Ms. Abbott, you were asking the question so that we could get a definite answer about what our next steps.
Correct.
Correct. And I would see, I'm used to sitting over here and then I can speak first, but Kevin usually says, what do you all think next steps should be, fellow counselors? So I guess since I'm sitting as chair, I have to ask that.
Well, I think it's pretty clear, and hopefully they understand. The four speakers that got up understand that they had 3 or 4 changes that they would like to make, or as you stated, 7 and 2.
Yes, that's what
To
I
bring those
counted up.
forth to the town clerk on behalf of a counselor or the council and say, we would like you to put these forth to the planning board. Again, it's a process, as the solicitor said, it's by state law. We have to put it forth to the planning board. They will hear it at a meeting, and then they will up and down vote and say, no, we really don't need these. We have enough in the current ordinance to make the changes and fit it the way we need to. Or yes, we agree that we can make some of these changes in order to tighten up the ordinance, and then it would come back to the council at a later meeting. So the next meeting, if you folks want to get together as a group, as you have in the past, and you say, we agree that we've gone through all 8 pages of this ordinance and we want to see these additions or these subtractions, all you have to do is give it to the council. We will forward to the planning board at the next meeting, and the planning board will take it up at a future meeting, probably in July or August. I don't know. They typically take a break on one of those months. Yes, Ms. Rogers.
I'd just like to ask, like, who came up with the percentage of that could be solar on these farms? How is that determined?
Mr. Crosby determined it based on what's abutting, the 150-foot setbacks and the 100-foot setbacks, and what is currently on the property.
So I did study quite a few of the ordinances from Rhode Island now, and most farmlands, it's 20% of your farm. So on these, it's like 66, 44, 60%, 36. I mean, is that just like what's left after you do the setback?
Correct.
Correct, yes. Because they're zoned light industrial, so
They're
they
not
meet
residential.
light industrial zoning with the setbacks and can have that.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, not to bring up Tiverton, but they're doing 20% of farmland for solar.
But how is that farmland
Zone.
zoned?
Yeah, what's
Is
the
it-
zone?
It's zoned as industrial commercial. They're not allowing any solar on anything other than contaminated land and 20% of farmland with a 5-acre maximum. So they don't have to have this large amount, but their setback is 200 feet for everybody and on every situation. And some of the other solar ordinance that I read, none of them, 66%, none of them had that. I mean, you're basically asking farmers to put solar on the property when you give them that. I'm just saying that, like, the idea of solar was so that people could keep farm, so it could help them hang on to their land, not so that they could fill it with solar. That was not the intention of solar on farmland. And I did look at suggestions from the Rhode Island DEM and in the environmental, and they all say that. They all suggest that farmland is not covered, covered 66%. From my calculations, which is probably off a bit, it's 144 acres in Portsmouth of farmland that would be covered with solar on this. And I don't know if this would also be eligible for variances if you didn't fit into these 4. Like if somebody came, say I came, and I wanted to put my farm into Shears property, and I wanted to merge it so I would have more land, then I could do that. I could get to enough property. There are ways to get to enough property between asking for a variance or combining family farmland. I just think 66 acres, I don't know where that came from. All the farm, except for the setback, allowed to be solar. I think that needs to be taken a look at, and I'll bring that in my notes at the next meeting. Thank you.
Just to clarify, based on Mr. Crosby's research, you're looking at 53 acres. I'm doing my math right. 57 acres total of those 4 properties. And those are the only 4 properties as the current ordinance is written that could become solar fields. So it's not every property. I'm not going to name specific properties, but there are multiple farms that
We've already-
are
Yeah.
open space.
So there's a lot of
Right.
farms in Rhode Island that are zoned residential. Those are already off the books. They cannot be developed into solar
Mhm.
per the changes in the ordinance. There are a handful of agricultural lots that are zoned light industrial. Of those, when you put in the setbacks, there are the 4 that remain. On GIS, on our website, you can, poke around a little bit and look at what's zoned light industrial that is of that size and identify what those 4 lots are, which is essentially what Mr. Crosby
Right.
did. And those are zoned light industrial. And I think that is more the issue than the fact that, we have a solar ordinance that could be improved. It's that we have agricultural land, zoned light industrial, surrounded by residential district. That's the crux of the problem here, in my opinion. And frankly, I don't think we're going to fix that with a solar ordinance. That's a bigger zoning issue than just our solar ordinance, because there's other things that could go in those light industrial lots that are equally egregious as solar arrays.
Now, if they didn't fit into the requirements that these 4 do, can somebody come to you and ask for a variance?
I mean, that's a much steeper slope to climb. I mean, I could say that about a residential zoned farm as well, right? Somebody who owns a farm and wants to develop a solar array could theoretically go
Right.
request a zoning change from residential to light industrial. It's just, yeah, I mean, yes, theoretically, they could do all that. There's a lot more hoops to jump through and that would all require approval. And so it's hard to try to legislate for every possible scenario like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I understand. It's just that I know, I've come to enough of these meetings to know that somebody had a deck close to someone's house and it was closer than it should be and it got passed.
They got passed. I know,
So,
you're right.
I'm just saying that that's great if you set this up, but if people can come and get a variance, there's ways to, if you want to put solar in with all these gaps, there's plenty of ways. Like I said, I have no intention of putting solar in my field. I don't have enough to do it, but I'm going to be right near another solar field. So you see what I'm saying is that they do have a tendency to spread because once the grid gets in, everything, they haunt you, they call you, they say, we're coming in, we have the system. It's a lot less expensive to hook onto the next farm than to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that's just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Munch.
Richard Munch, 775 Union Street. Should we put in another moratorium? Because I see this going. We had the first ordinance. Companies came in with their applications.
Yeah.
We saw that. Now, these 4 parcels, which are the mystery parcels right now. If I owned one of those and I was thinking about it, I'd be here at the town hall tomorrow putting the application in. Because what I see now, what's going on is now we're going to have another meeting. We're going to come up with suggestions. That's going to go to the planning board. The planning board's going to look at it. It's going to come back to the town council. We're talking months.
Are there any pending applications for new solar arrays at the moment? No?
But
Oh,
just
Uh,
saying,
right.
We couldn't vote on a moratorium tonight.
We
It's not on
could
the agenda.
not because
Yeah,
it's
I
not
am-
on the agenda, but
but should we can I propose that that gets put on the agenda? Because if not, this is going down that road again, which we were all on. I can remember when the first ordinance was passed, people said, hopefully no companies will come in and, out of the goodness of their heart, not put in an application. That didn't go. So, I don't know if we want to go through all that again, or if we need to do something quick. And I think the quickest thing would be to put in a moratorium.
Can I ask Mr. Gavin, is there any legal reason why we couldn't have a moratorium proposed at the next town council meeting? You're muted.
Yes, I see. You can put it on, propose it.
Yep, okay. That's a yes.
That's a
no.
yes.
Whether or not,
Whether or not people will support it or bring up
challenge it or
enough.
not, I mean, that can always happen, but you can just basically repeat what you did last year and put it on an agenda and vote.
Is it considered a public taking?
I can't really, I don't want to speculate on that question. It's too broad and I mean, moratoriums are a challenge. It's supposed to be an emergency to address an emergency situation, given, and I don't want to, but we can talk about that in an executive session if you'd like, but I mean, yeah, I just, if you want to propose it and just adopt it, and then it's up, if someone disagrees, then there are things that people can do to challenge it, but no one challenged the last one.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
And now the universe of potential parcels is obviously much less than as Gary noted in his presentation.
Right. All right, are there any other comments or questions from the audience? Mr. Crosby, do you have anything you'd like to add or?
So, sorry, but I mean, can that be put on the agenda for the May 27th meeting then?
I believe
Wow.
so.
We could, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I think there's already consensus that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. I'm sorry to make it go on for so long. But I really think it's important to let you all have a chance to say something in public. Been living with it for so long. Okay, so the next item. Here we are.
New business one.
Sorry. Oh,
That's fine.
we will let you leave, so you don't have to. What?
Can't let them leave. Once they come, they're gonna stay for the whole thing.
That is the rule.
I really appreciate the way that you handled this meeting and your courtesy towards all of us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Good
Good
night,
night.
everyone. Okay, anyone else want to step away? Okay, so that was old business. I honestly think that we were going to go in a good direction. So that is new business. Request approval of expansion plan for dog park. Oh my goodness, you've been here so long. Thank you for staying.
Good evening, councilors. Jane Regan is the chairman of the Portsmouth Dog Park Committee, and she can't be here this evening, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me. My name is Andrea Rounds. I live at 15 Milk Street in Bristol, and I'm a member of the committee. 5 years ago, thanks to you and a lot of wonderful donors, the Portsmouth Dog Park was built. And it was founded by Bunny Miller, Portsmouth resident, and it's been a tremendous success ever since. We have many people to thank for that: the Van Buren Charitable Foundation, the Aquidneck Land Trust, Rhode Island Foundation, over 300 gifts and in-kind contributions from individuals and small businesses, and the town council gave us a loan, which we paid off in full in February 2020. Tremendous community support. mainly because of a culture that's been instilled of kindness and respect, engaged volunteers who instill responsible dog park etiquette. And we have our community cleanup days, which are very raucous because the dogs are involved. And we want to thank the Marines who come help us from the Naval Justice School. We feel the success of the park has exceeded all of our expectations. I think you should know that more than, 50% of the people who use the park are from Aquidneck Island. More than 50% are from outside Aquidneck Island. They're from Tiverton and Fall River and Little Compton and Bristol. As one of our fans said, it's a great place for dogs to socialize and people too. We realize because of the popularity of the park, it requires increased access. So in April of 2020, we created a capital improvement plan. On that plan, our priorities included increasing the size of the park, adding night lighting, increased parking, plant trees for shade. And by the way, we want to thank the Aquidneck Land Trust for their generosity. They have been supporting us in adding trees for several years now. Create a memorial garden, equip the agility area, and install dog-friendly AstroTurf or something that will solve our mud problem after the rainstorm. To do this, though, we felt we needed to do our due diligence. So in November of 2021, we commissioned a feasibility study that was funded by Van Buren Charitable Foundation and conducted by Narragansett Engineering and partially funded by them as well. In addition, we started a year-long data analytics project to compute the attendance and the user, people using the park. This was also funded by Van Buren. And it's a year-long project. It's being conducted by a mathematics intern at Salve University. And we're happy to say that there's some really interesting things going on as a result of the data project. We installed trail counters in February, and our intern is designing a web-based dashboard of charts and graphs. And indeed, he's also incorporating weather data. So we will be able to see what time of the day people use the park, what day of the week, what time of the year, and what the weather conditions were. It's not done yet, but preliminary data is showing that the median, not the average, the median daily attendance in May was 160 people, 170 dogs. When we built the park, we thought it would be attended 80 people a day. This is twice as much. The median daily attendance on weekends is 200 to 300 a day. We're also developing a user survey with a digital QR code so that we can get feedback from our users all the time, at any time with their cell phones. The chart you're seeing at the bottom here is an example of, it's hard to read, but it's just an example of what we're working on. It's the month of May, the number of people, the number of dogs, and the number of cars. Thanks to Tracy Stroll, who's on our dog park committee, who's an engineer at Newark. She and the professor at Salve have worked with the intern to come up with an algorithm that will help us determine this. It's my great pleasure to publicly thank the Van Buren Charitable Foundation for their support. They have granted us up to $170,000 to do the major portion of our capital improvement plan. We have budgeted 98 to increase the park. That's double the size of the park. Install fencing around the north and the west part. It's kind of a dog leg, no pun intended, around the north and the west. And install nearly a half a mile of trails through native landscape. And to clear the memorial garden and the agility area. The parking lot expansion, They've also fully funding installing night lighting. In the winter months, when the sun sets, people come to the park after work and can't exercise their dogs. So this $23,000 will do the trick with that. And they've also agreed to pay for half of the expansion of the parking lot. So why am I here tonight is to ask for the town council's official blessing for us to proceed. The next steps are, if you agree, that we'll have a planning meeting with the DPW, Brian Woodhead, and the Narragansett Engineering, and the Portsmouth Dog Park Committee Capital Improvement Committee. We also are, I'm talking to the chairman of the Department of Landscape Architecture at the University of Rhode Island in hopes that perhaps he can get his students to help us design a landscaping plan for the trails and for the Memorial Garden. This summer, we're going to do a call to artists, hopefully Rhode Island artists, to do a sculpture as the central feature of the Memorial Garden. And we are about to launch on a campaign, after all of this generosity, a campaign to invite the community if they'd like to sponsor benches, agility equipment, and landscaping. On behalf of Jane Regan, who's the chair of the committee, and on behalf of the Dog Park Committee, we want you to know how grateful we are to you, to the town of Portsmouth, to all the donors, to the Van Buren Charitable Foundation, and to all those people who use the park and who make it a very special place for the dogs and for everyone around. You've got to come visit us, come to the park and see it. If you don't get a chance to do that, please go on our website. Jane Regan has this incredible gallery of family portraits of dogs and their owners. You can take a look at that on the website. And so the next person I'd like to invite up is Neil, who's going to give you detailed explanation of the project plans. Thank you all very much.
Hi, everyone. Neil Ingrani, PLS, Narragansett Engineering. Could we go to the third sheet, if you don't mind? Actually, my mistake. Back up one sheet. There we go. That's perfect. Thank you. So as was mentioned, phase one started in around 2017. That achieved the initial small and large dog park, as well as a small parking area. Since then, the dog park has been a major success. This plan aims to build on that success and correct some issues, namely with the parking. The site's located in open space zone, and the use is obviously open space, so it's appropriate. But right now, my understanding is people are parking on Smith Road, and the town staff have indicated that they want to solve this problem. So our solution is to build or extend a parking lot toward the north of where the existing parking lot is. We'll lose 5 spaces, but we'll gain 24 for a net gain of 19 spaces. We'll also improve the circulation, promote a one-way flow, and overall make for a safer entry and exit from the park. The parking lot will be a gravel base. It'll be similar to what's there now. There are proposed 2 stormwater BMPs to handle runoff. A small portion of the park is being claimed for the parking area, but this portion is only about 1,000 square feet. And that's going to be made up by what will be gained as the agility area, which is shown on the plans toward the north. We are proposing to add 6 lights, mostly around the parking area, but they'll also illuminate the small and large dog park entrances, as well as the agility area. These are highly efficient LEDs. Also dark sky compliant, and the use of the lights is really to promote that sort of dawn, dusk, winter use extension of the park. Some of the more exciting parts, the core of the expansion is a wooded pathway. This pathway really snakes along the north side of the woods. Those trails have already been cleared. They'll be finished with mulch from the town stockpile, and then the perimeter of the park will really be fenced in. So if you're walking through those trails, you'll get sort of a woodsy feel, but you'll also be within the enclosure and the safety of the park. There are plans for a memorial garden in a location to be determined. And as I mentioned, there's a 4,200 square foot agility area that will be added to the park. At this point, my office has developed plans. They're pretty extensive. We've done surveys, soil testing, facility plans, stormwater, corresponded with DEM staff, and obviously had more than a handful of meetings with the town and the dog park committee. I would like to thank Steve Bakos from East Coast Construction. He generously donated his time to put a construction cost estimate together that really helped us figure out where the budget was going to go. And finally, the project is not in any wetland resources areas. And according to DEM staff, due to the limited size of the lot, we don't need a RIPTES permit. So should the council vote to approve, we should be able to pursue bidding and permitting really with the only permits required being those through the town. Thank you for your time and attention. Happy to field any questions.
On the council, have any questions or comments? I would just say, Mr. Hingorani, that you have to make your writing smaller. No, I'm just kidding. It's absolutely tiny. But thank you for your work.
Sure, happy to do it. Thanks for your time.
I only have one request, and it's not for you, Neil. You all said, thank you. As you're doing your QBRs and you're doing your surveys and asking people things, one of the things that would be helpful to know, since 50% of the people are coming from off the island, what else are they doing when they come? Are they just coming in and going to the dog park and going home? Are they stopping at Clements? Are they going to shops in town? Are they adding to the economic impact of the town? That would be interesting to find out.
Good question. The intern from Salve Regina at the moment is doing mathematical data analysis. In the fall term, we're going to have someone from the economics department who's going to do an economic impact study for us.
Perfect.
Great, thank you so much. Is there anyone else who's going to speak to this? Sure. State your name and address.
Tom Grebe, 110 Third Drive. I've got a couple of concerns and a thought on this. My first concern is that it's been my experience that the greater the congregation of dogs, the greater the chance of a problem. And when I hear that there's 200 to 300 people a day on the weekend with dogs where we are now, and we're going to make the park more attractive and larger, I'm a little concerned. The second is that the presence of the dog park has greatly increased the number of off-leash dogs in Melville Park. And that has, to some extent, changed the character of that park. I still remember when my 2.5-year-old grandson, who's now 7, so it was a while ago, was run over by a black lab running after a seagull. Those are the sorts of things that happen when dogs are off leash in the area. The thought I have is that Melville Park area for this dog park was a close first to a second for another area at the Glen. Instead of expanding this park, what about creating a second park? Again, a smaller area, fewer dogs in each area, perhaps satisfying a different group of people on the east side or other communities. And that would allow the same number of dogs, but in smaller congregations. And it would not increase the area, the Melville area's attractiveness for using it for off-leash dogs. I mean, it got so bad that I believe this council, most of you remember being asked by the Melville Park Committee, can't we make Melville Park an entirely off-leash park? And I was ready to bounce on that one, but thankfully Chief Lee was here before me and got that changed. So those are my thoughts. I don't think we need a larger park. I think 2 parks might be a better way of serving the dog community, if I can call it that, in a better way. Just think about that, and I think it's worth studying. Thank you.
If you'd like to respond, yes.
A couple of things to consider, I think. One is we intentionally decided to design the extension to be trails in a wooded area so that it was a chance for dog owners to walk their dogs off leash in a trail-like setting, because we know that Melville Park is off limits without being on a leash. And we respect that very much indeed, which is why the dog park exists. It's fenced in. And I think the reason to expand it is to keep the dogs contained. It's also in an area, I can't speak to why it didn't go to the Glen Park originally, but I do know that it's pretty off the beaten track and away from a lot of activity, which I think some people appreciate.
Thank you. Mr. Grebe.
I'm sorry, I just can't accept that. It's not off the beaten path. It's right at the campsite there, across from a playground for children. I don't want to denigrate the dog park. I think it's done a good job. I just don't think it needs to be expanded or doubled in this area. And I think 2 parks are better than 1.
Does the council have any comments or questions? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
No.
That we approve the dog
Expansion of the
parks,
dogs.
proposal for an expansion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. We have a 6-0 vote on that. Thank you so much for your work, that you were able to leverage our match of 34,000 for up to 170,000 is just amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So the next is a request for approval of conceptual design services for the Stone Bridge. Is that item? It's
Madam
been-
President, we've decided that it would be in the best interest of the town to cancel this RFQ and reissue it at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. So we will move.
Motion to table new business number 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. All right, motion passes 6-0. On to item 3, request approval to collaborate with the Bristol Police Department on a 1-year pilot program for automatic license plate readers to be installed on either side of Mount Hope Bridge to aid in suicide prevention. Chief Peters.
Madam Vice President and members of the council, I'm here this evening to request your consideration and approval for collaboration with the Bristol Police Department on a 1-year pilot program to install automatic license plate readers on either side of the Mount Hope Bridge to aid in suicide prevention. So several months ago, I had spoken with Chief Lynch of the Bristol Police Department, and the conversation was looking at ways to aid in suicide prevention on the bridge. Our departments are frequently meeting on the bridge for calls of service regarding individuals in mental health crisis. An idea that was presented was for the installation of license plate readers that would be able to provide an alert to the police departments when a vehicle associated with a person in mental health crisis was heading towards the Mount Hope Bridge. Our department would be requesting to place one camera on the Bristol Ferry Road and a second camera on Boyd's Lane to capture license plates approaching the Mount Hope Bridge, while Bristol would install 2 cameras on their approach to the bridge. So while examining the data for the bridge, between 2016 and 2020, the Portsmouth Police Department have responded to the Mount Hope Bridge 1,100 times. Of those calls, 62 of those have been for a person in mental health crisis. And over the past 9 years, unfortunately, 17 people have died of suicide from the Mount Hope Bridge. The Bristol Police reported more than 200 calls in a 9-year period involving suicidal individuals. Many of those calls come to the police departments in what's referred to as a BOLO, or the acronym of Be on the Lookout. And that's a time when family members or individuals can contact the police department, whether it's their hometown or the state police, or it could be in another, even in Massachusetts, and say that there's an individual who's distraught and contemplating suicide. If they have a vehicle description, they can provide a vehicle description. And at that time, we can put out a BOLO for the vehicle. So we have our officers be on the lookout for it. The circumstance happened as recently as this weekend, where we received a call from another police department in Rhode Island. That police department received a call from a loved one saying that an individual wanted to jump off a bridge. So our officers are alerted, along with individual Newport Police Department in Jamestown that have bridges in their locations, to be on the lookout for this individual. This system would attempt to automate the process to aid our officers in locating individuals in distress more quickly and efficiently. This same BOLO procedure that I talked about is the same that's also involved with Amber Alerts that you've heard about, and Silver Alerts. The Amber Alerts being when there's a missing child, or heaven forbid, a child who's been kidnapped or child snatched. And a Silver Alert would be for a individual who was suffering from some dementia or other disability, and perhaps might be lost, that a BOLO would be put out in those situations. So should a vehicle identified in one of these BOLOs travel by one of these fixed cameras, an alert would be sent to the police department with what I'm told is as few as 10 seconds, and officers could immediately respond to the area to search for an individual in mental health crisis or other need, and be able to intervene to save a life. So the cameras we'd be requesting to install are solar-powered, motion-activated fixed cameras that use technology to identify and take a snapshot of the critical details of the rear of the vehicle as it passes by the fixed camera. I want to also make you aware that these systems will also be able to identify a vehicle which is involved in a bank robbery or other major crime, a stolen vehicle. That's also included as anything that would be in the NCIC database, which is the National Crime Information Center database. So license plate readers capture only the rear of the vehicle and the rear of the vehicle only. The camera does not capture people. It does not do facial recognition, and is not used for traffic enforcement. So if someone would go to buy one of these cameras at 100 miles per hour on Bristol Ferry Road, we would not be alerted. We would not know about it from this camera system. It is only capturing rear of vehicle images. So these cameras are currently used in 6 other Rhode Island communities: Cranston, Tiverton, Woonsocket, Chepachet, Gloucester, and Lincoln. And 3 other communities are currently in the process of researching to acquire these cameras. The town of Bristol recently, as last month, they have just approved the installation of these cameras on their side of the bridge for the same purpose that I'm here requesting it tonight. So including your backup tonight is also a letter from the ACLU that I included to be as transparent as possible and include the issues that are from and the concerns associated with these cameras. I've also included what our department's policy would be for the usage of these cameras. So working with Bristol Police Department, we tried to craft a policy that addressed the ACLU concerns. We wanted to be responsive to what the ACLU and the issues that were brought up on the other side, so this program could go forward. So some of the concerns you'll see that we addressed all the concerns you can see that we addressed that we believe we have in the policy would be photographing or recording or producing images of the occupants of the motor vehicle is strictly prohibited. The department would have to appear in front of the town council for any expansion of this program as currently presented. Location of the cameras will be made available to the public on our website. And the department will also post a transparency portal on our website, which provides daily updates and accountability, including the total vehicles detected, searches, hot lists, access policy, and retention. So the goal of this is to be as transparent as possible with our process. So other questions that have come up and that have arisen is who has access to this data? How is it being stored? So the footage would be owned by the town of Portsmouth and will never be sold or shared by the Flock camera system. All data is stored securely on the AWS government cloud with end-to-end encryption, which I'm told is the same system used by the NSA. There'll be a 30-day retention period of the data. After 30 days, the data is 100% deleted and unrecoverable. A search reason is also required for all data with individual logins for our members, for all access, ensuring an audit trail and accountability by our members. So one of the success stories that we want to share, because so this way you can have an idea of where it's worked and where this has worked in another situation around the country. And it came from us from the Flock system, was in Chesterfield, Missouri, where police received a call to check the welfare of a female who had not been in contact with her family, and they were concerned about her mental health. Officers were able to identify the vehicle and the license plate and place those identifiers in the Flock camera system. The cameras alerted on the vehicle and officers were able to locate the individual alive, but in need of medical attention. Chesterfield PD credits the Flock cameras with being able to locate the individual quickly and save her life. So this is a success story that we hope would be able to have occur here as well in the Portsmouth, Bristol area. So and finally, can this aid in major crimes? Yes. The main reason we are requesting to implement this license plate readers is to aid in suicide prevention so that we can provide our officers with notice that a person in crisis is in the vicinity of the bridge and to ultimately get this individual the resources they need to save their life. Bristol Police was able to obtain funding for these cameras on both sides of the bridge for a one-year pilot program. The funding would come from the Matthew Patton Foundation. Matthew was a local service member who tragically died of suicide 9 years ago, in the East Bay Community Action Program. There'd be no cost to the town of Portsmouth taxpayers. Both these organizations are in support of this initiative by taking measures to prevent suicide. There also has been discussion of other preventative measures such as nets or barriers or other technology installed on the bridges. But these cameras would just be one tool that we can use to implement very quickly and effectively to combat this issue. After a year, I would come back to this council to discuss the measure of its successes or its failures or its concerns. And at that time, the council can decide if it wishes to continue or discontinue this program. If we can prevent one person from dying of suicide, then the program, in my opinion, would be well worth it. I ask that you approve the Portsmouth Police Department to collaborate with the Bristol Police Department to install 2 cameras, one on Bristol Ferry Road and one on Boyd's Lane to aid in suicide prevention. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chief Peters. Are there any questions from
How
Town
soon would you
Council?
be installing these?
I've been told by Flock they could have it once approval goes in, the funding is already available. They would say within 6 weeks to a few months, we could get these up and running.
So the 1-year trial period, let's just round it up and say it's August 1st.
Correct.
You'd come back here in July and say, we saved 3 lives.
Absolutely.
We didn't do anything or whatever happened.
Absolutely.
I do have some concerns about personal liberties and all the other things that go into this. Being that it's 1 year and you're going to come back and we'll have a chance to, well, the next council will have a chance to decide whether or not to continue it. I'd be willing to support it for a year. I know of a few people who have unfortunately jumped off that bridge, and it's And I've walked up and down the beach looking for one. And I don't ever want to have anybody do that.
Thank you.
I fully appreciate the intention behind this, and I think it's, the goals are ultimately, I appreciate the intention. I feel this feels very minority reporty and big brothery. I had serious concerns with license plate readers for the red light cameras. Don't like them, don't believe in them. I think this is a serious, invasion of my privacy. I think there's a million other things that would take precedent in my eyes for suicide prevention over vehicle tracking on Mount Hope Bridge. I don't think Chepachet, Woonsocket, any of those towns put them in for suicide prevention. I don't know what they're trying to prevent suicide on. So I think the intentions are a little bit mixed there. There's no way I can support this, even if it's for a year. But thank you. And I do appreciate the intention. I just don't agree with the means in this case.
Anyone else?
Yeah, actually, what is Chepachet using theirs for?
I don't know. I don't know what Chepachet is using for. It's if they're using it for other means. I would counter with that if we were looking to do it for a crime based thing. I'd be up here asking you to put it on East and West Main Road. That would be the area that we have the most traffic, that we would collect the most data on plates. But that's not where I'm here asking for it. It's the approaches, as people leave town and heading towards the Mount Hope Bridge.
So does this company do like speed enforcement? Is that one of their?
They don't do speed
programs?
enforcement. I believe that they're only there, they do crime prevention. So they can use this camera for crime prevention and to identify areas. So if there's a bull or the Amber Alert, and it's been successful around the country for situations like that, where if they have an Amber Alert for a missing child, if they have a Silver Alert for a missing senior, stolen vehicles, that is where it alerts them and it gets the officers in that location to solve crime. So it's my understanding that those communities are using them for that sole purpose.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Fitzmaurice.
Thank you, Madam President, for the evening. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. First thing I want to do is thank Chief Peters for his honesty on this thing. I don't know how many of you read the ACLU letter that was attached to this agenda item, but it makes a strong case against the use of these systems. Although the letter was addressed to the council in Cranston, not to us. PCC has objected to surveillance systems, general surveillance systems used in the town of Portsmouth on a number of occasions before this council and occasions elsewhere. There's already one surveillance system on the bridge now. At the end of the bridge, as you're going north, on your right, about 30 to 40 feet or so, if I have my distance correct, attached to the railing. There's one on the other side of the other end of the bridge in Bristol. Does anybody know what that is? I guess not.
I think those are part of.
It's operations for the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority.
But it's still in Portsmouth, right? Yes, it is. So they should have consulted with us before they put a surveillance system up in our town. I think it's a legitimate answer to say nobody knows anything about this thing, because I don't think anybody asked you. But it's kind of a hint in the direction we're headed with these sort of systems. I think all of us are well aware that the surveillance systems grow in capability every year. Computer systems that support them grow in capability every year. And if we're to protect ourselves, our privacy at all, we need to start taking a close look at these things. I think I'm willing to support this thing in the short term. But I believe there needs to be an ordinance that covers this operation of this thing to prevent a transition, into other operations. Chief Peters has given us his word. That's good enough for me, and I'll support this for 1 year. But I'd like to see that be turned into an ordinance where anybody that decides to change the nature of the operations of these systems or add any other systems to them must come before the council for a change in an ordinance so that it's properly notified, everybody in town gets a chance to talk. So problem is that Flock Systems manufactures a number of other systems that are much more invasive. And the ACLU letter speaks to those, and I would recommend those members of the council that may not have read the letter to do so. But it's a pretty good letter. And so there's other systems. This is kind of the foot in the door type of thing financially for a business. The business doesn't really care about our privacy, although they state in their website that they do. But we look to the council to guard our privacy in these matters and to be very careful about it. I'm sympathetic and understanding of the need here as presented by Chief Peters. And again, I'll support this for a year, but I want a good solid report and I want good solid control over this. And I want there to be an absolute understanding that we're talking about two systems limited to the performance of reading the rear license plate of a car. But we're also going to get bumper stickers and obviously the model of the car and the color of the car and a bunch of other things along with this, because that's what the system does, the one that we're going to install. And we need absolute assurances that this data is being deleted. And I'd like to know one question. How does the system transmit its data from the standalone unit to the police force? Don't see Chief.
I believe we have a representative from Flock that might be able to answer that question online. If Laura, is Laura on that? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much. I so regret that I cannot be there in person with you all. I was up in Rhode Island last week and really enjoyed being there. I hoped I could have come up for this meeting, but unfortunately I got COVID, so I'm stuck at home right now. Just to immediately answer your question, Mr. Fitzsimmons, our system transports data through LTE. So through the same kind of data encryption and data transmittal systems that are used by cell phone companies. So we have contracts depending on what region of the country we're in with different cell phone providers. And just to address one additional thing that you mentioned about really wanting there to be democratic approval and public input in this process. The reason I work at Flock, the thing that gets me so excited about this company is that we really are dedicated to protecting civil liberties while balancing law enforcement needs and helping meet those needs. And so we want there to be robust discussion. I've so enjoyed tonight hearing how active your community is and caring about the issues that you're facing. And we want to be a part of those dialogues to answer your questions, to make sure that you feel comfortable with the technology that we're putting in place, because we know that this works to help our police with the issues that they're facing. And we also know that it's important for us to protect our citizens' privacy and to make sure that all of their data is secure. And so we want to keep this dialogue ongoing and are happy to help the chief provide you any data that you need in order to feel comfortable moving forward. And that goes to the entire council and anyone in your community.
Thank you. I'll make one point to the council. that I think is important, and you'll have to take my word for it. I've spent some time in the intelligence community. Nobody's data is secure, especially from the NSA. So anybody that thinks it is has been deceived. But we destroy it every 30 days. That ought to do somewhat effort to keep it secure. But this stuff shouldn't be ending up in China on the web. So, and there's a real possibility it will if the systems break down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice. Dr. Ryan.
So Chief, how will the success or failure of this program be measured?
I think in 1 year, we look back and see, we'll be able to have all the data that came across. How many times we received a hit, how much information that was involved in it, how many people that we were able to intercept during one of our bolos. I think that would be the measure of it, in my opinion, is if a bolo was put into that system and we were able to locate that vehicle and prevent that person from walking up the bridge and going up to the top of the bridge and getting there. That's how I
So,
measure the success.
My other question is, I mean, so these cameras are looking at cars approaching the bridge. How much time do you have between the car being within range of the camera and the person actually jumping off the bridge?
So I've been told that we get the alert as quickly as 10 seconds. So within 10 seconds or 10 seconds, that would go to our dispatch. We'd have the officers respond. And many times these bolos, based on my experience, people will park onto the bridge in all areas, which will give the officer time. Sometimes they'll make several passes over the bridge, and they typically, based on my experience, they do not necessarily stop the first time at the center span of the bridge. So this would give both departments a time to get to that location.
What's your response time from the police station to the bridge?
In a situation like this, I mean, we can be there within a couple of minutes.
As part, wow, that's really Boston, huh? As part of the policy here that you have written up, I guess I'll put it into the motion, but no expansion of the policy that exists. I don't know if Mr. Fitzmaurice has written the policy that you have in here that specifically spells out what it can be utilized for. So, but along with coming back and re-upping it next year or declining it again next year would be that no changes to the policy can be made without coming, even within the first year, without coming back to the council.
Absolutely. I agree. I have no objection to what Mr. Fitzmaurice said about codifying it in an ordinance. If we want to do it now, we'll wait and see if it's a successful program before we would do something like that. But I have no objection. I think it's a great idea.
We can wait a year. You have a policy that pretty well spells out exactly what this trial period is going to do. If it gets codified in a year, we can look at doing an ordinance then.
Thank you, Mr. Katzman.
Thank you. Chief Peters, you mentioned that the ACLU letter raises certain concerns, and those were addressed in this policy.
Yes, sir.
The ACLU letter, and I understand the circumstances may have been different. I don't know what Cranston did, and there may not be a one-to-one match here, but near the opening of their letter, they talk about urging Cranston to adopt an ordinance, which this is not, it's a policy. I have some question about why you chose that approach, how the policy was drafted. It's lengthy, it's detailed, probably didn't come from scratch from your department, I'm guessing. So where did the inputs that went into the policy come from?
Sure.
And is there a one-to-one match? Can I go into this ACLU letter, see an issue raised, look at our policy, find a provision that provides some protection for every issue?
I believe, yes.
Unfortunately, I have not had the time to do it myself.
I believe yes. So we've outlined in the areas of the policy. Policy up here. So the highlighted bulletins from the ACLU letter, so the cameras capture more than license plates. We've addressed that in our policy. That would be under section Roman numeral 5B, which talks about making sure that we're what exactly we're getting, what exactly we're capturing. And if, by all means, if anybody thinks that it doesn't or wants to add to it, I'm more than willing to open, but we believe that we've done it through those bullet points. The second bullet point.
What would be the repercussions if someone were to not follow this policy?
So someone in our department, or if, yep, so the system itself doesn't capture anything more than that, so they wouldn't be able to see anything. If someone actually violated it by, if they used it for non-law enforcement means or some sort of personal thing, then they would face serious consequences, suspension, up to termination. We have to go by the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, so I'm bound by that. But put it this way, I won't be happy and they'll be facing consequences.
And this
Chief
is a-
Peters, do you want to highlight the audit feature of our system? Just how we automatically will send you data on when officers are searching.
Sure. So part of that, what I addressed was they have, everybody has their own individual login. So part of that is for accountability and transparency. So each individual officer is an audit. When that individual officer would log into the system, we can see what he or she puts into the system, what they run, what they put in for a hot list. And that's all accountable where they can have, we be able to do an audit. Part of the policy is that we will do audits throughout the year. A supervisor will review what's being put in there, making sure it complies with policy. You cannot put anything in there in the system unless it's identifiable to an actual call number, incident number, arrest number. There has to be an identifiable marker that's associated with something with the Portsmouth Police Department. So when we do the audit, we can look back and see that it was case number 123. This is what was put into it. Someone would then look at it and say, does it match? Does it doesn't match? And they would perform an audit and address any issues that come up through reporting.
And it's a fixed camera. You can't, there's no joystick in the precinct that you can just
Correct.
move it around.
Nope, absolutely not. It's a fixed camera that's positioned going the face, capturing the traffic as they're moving away from the camera.
Right, anyone else? Then I would just add that I am with Mr. Fitzmaurice. If you are recommending it, I would tend to feel that it's a good idea. I would just say that also I generally favor the push to have suicide prevention barriers that's moving at the state level, but I just read that, that the Mount Hope Bridge is listed with the National Registry of Historic Places, and you'd need to get permission to alter its appearance in any way. So maybe,
Yeah,
I know.
I don't know where we stand on that. I have heard some of the similar concerns, and that's why I mentioned it. I know there's other measures that other people are looking to put in place, but I think this is something that we can effectively and efficiently put in place, and with the hope that this is something that could prevent, if we could prevent one person, we can get that bull over, we can stop that. And to me, it's well worth it. This doesn't cost any taxpayers any money. The Matthew Patton Foundation, the East Bay Community Action Program, they both believe in this program, that this can make a substantial difference. And it's something that I'm willing to try. I think it's something that, that we can't just throw our hands up and say, hey, we'll get there and we'll figure it out. So
We know that the police have been handling so much mental health issues, especially in light of COVID, and we really appreciate that you're taking this proactive approach. Do we have a motion then?
I would make a motion that we accept.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Patton. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me okay? I want to
Yes.
thank Chief Peters for inviting me and for the council for hearing my comment.
Whoops.
Did we lose him?
Did we, Mr. Patton, are you still online? Is he there?
He is.
Huh. We cannot hear you, Mr. Patton. Did you perhaps mute yourself?
So there's click.
Hello.
How about now?
Okay,
Yes, now we can
yes,
hear you.
yes, we can hear you now, Mr. Patton. Go ahead. Now we cannot hear you.
Damn it.
Now we can
got
hear you
that.
again.
Don't ever buy an LG Stylo 6.
Okay, thank you. Good.
I don't know where I left, but my son Sergeant Matthew Patton died by suicide on May 13th, 2013. 2 years later, my wife and I started the Matthew Patton Foundation with the goal of reducing suicide among service members, veterans, and their families. When the Bristol Police Department approached us about this, we were very excited to join forces with them. I do want to make some clarifications or amplifications of what Chief Peters had to say. This is a reactive system. It's a reactive application. We are not planning to watch every car that goes over the Mount Hope Bridge and try to figure out if anybody is suicidal. We are going to get calls from people who are concerned about loved ones and find them and intervene if necessary. So, there's a reason to be concerned about privacy. But I think that the way that the respective police departments are going about implementing this system with its security measures and controls, along with the transparency policies that they've put in place for identifying where the cameras are, what their purpose is, what their capabilities are, and not going beyond those capabilities to provide a potentially life-saving measure, I think is extremely valuable for both Bristol and Portsmouth communities, and I dare say Bristol and Newport counties completely, just because of the availability of means to suicide that this would provide some protective measures against. I wish that there had been protective measures in place that could have slowed Matthew's suicide and given him time to think about what was going on so that he'd be with us today. So thank you for your time. I hope you will consider that this is not really intended as anything invasive. It is really something a tool that the police department can use to react to a wellness check, as the chief described, on one of their loved ones who may be headed to the bridge with an intent to end their life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. And I think I speak for the whole town council when we express our deepest sympathies for your loss and appreciation for your activism on this. Did we have,
Yes.
oh, one more person wishes to speak?
No.
Okay. All right. So there was a motion.
I'll take a swing at the motion. I will make a motion that we allow Chief and the Portsmouth Police Department to collaborate with the Bristol Police Department in an automated license plate reader program for a period of 1 year, beginning from the date the cameras are installed. And that the policy 325-.03 be utilized as the guiding principles and cannot be changed unless brought forth to the town council for approval.
Second that?
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Nay.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Aye.
Dr. Ryan,
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good luck, Chief.
Thank you. All right, our next item is the request for approval of the use of ARPA funds for the skid pump portable garage and portable fire pump for Hog Island for a total cost of $23,252. Chief Ford.
Good evening, Vice President, members of the council. Just to give a little bit of background, you're all familiar with Hog Island. I've been working with some of the representatives of that community, first to explore the island and find out for myself some of the challenges. And we had a meeting and went over some different goals and needs that are out there. I'm happy to say that since we started this conversation, we were able to basically give people addresses. There were no official streets. They didn't have addresses. So if anyone called 911, the best they could tell us was it was somewhere on Hog Island. Now everyone has an address that correlates to their, as far as 911 goes, I should say, they have an address that correlates to their parcel number, and 911 has that information, so we can literally get a call from 911, transfer and say, this is at 119 Hog Island, or this is 50 yards north of 119 Hog Island. We enlarged maps, modified some maps. So on our Marine One, the guys going over have maps to look at to see just how to get to 119 Hog Island. The problem is once we get there, if a resident isn't there waiting for us with a golf cart, we have no transportation on the entire island. And there's approximately 130 homes seasonally inhabited. So if there's a medical call, we arrive at the dock and we have no way to get to that patient or to bring that patient back, other than on the chance that a resident is waiting for us. If there were a fire, we have absolutely zero equipment. My guys show up right now on the boat, they get off on the dock and they don't have anything. We recently had a fire over there. Luckily for our operations, it was at the boathouse right there where we could pump water from our boat, from Bristol's boat. But if we have to go any further than that, we have nothing. So I tried a couple of different ways to go about this and try to get some costs down. So what I have before you, my request is Brian Woodhead was kind enough to tell me I could get a truck that he was going to be getting rid of. Certainly that's something that I have to keep my eye open down the road to improve upon. But if we can get a truck, I've looked into several different skid pumps there, mounted package pumps, have a water tank, have some hose, have a pump. They slide right in the bed of the pickup truck. If we got a newer one down the road, we could swap it out. That truck, and then also to have some place to store it in. Now, the representatives have, again, worked with me, assured me they could get us a place to put up what I call these portable garages. I actually have two of them on my own property. In the past, there was an old pump out there before my time. And at some point, it was out in the weather. And other times it was stored in a garage, maybe during the winter. We may look into something of that nature, but this would include putting a portable garage out there. And also what's called a floato pump. It's a small portable pump, literally floats, that could be brought with us, would be on the equipment out there and put on the shore. If the shore was anywhere close enough, we could pump right from the bay, either to fill up our pump that we had there or to actually fight a fire with that floato pump. So when I put all those numbers together, I'm in the 23,252 range. That's certainly isn't counting every little incidental. It's actually going to cost approximately $700 just to ship it over the truck. And if I do have to bring it back in the winter, but I'll address that in future budgetary cycles. So I would respectfully request that whatever funding is available in the APRA funding and anything else, if there isn't enough to cover the whole amount, I understand that we do have a capital reserve fund. I really think it's time for us to get some sort of transportation and equipment on Hog Island.
Madam Vice President, if I may, just to build upon what Chief Ford has laid out, I'd also remind the council that providing firefighting equipment on Hog Island and giving the firefighters this capability was identified in the climate resiliency planning and financing strategy that was developed by SNEP. So it is in the climate resilience CIP. So I would recommend that if this is approved by the council, we would utilize the ARPA funds that were earmarked for resiliency to fund this.
And that was my question.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Rayner. Any other questions or comments?
Motion to approve the request
Oh,
and
wait,
use the
there's
money for
one person who wants to
from
speak?
I'll
the
second
ARPA
it
funds.
for, and then we can.
ARPA resilience funds.
No, go
Nope, come on
ahead.
up.
Do you want to come up? If you just tell us who you are and where you live, that would be great.
My name is Steve Croteau, and I used to be at Zero Beach Road, which is Hog Island. I actually live in Tiverton, but I also have a place on Hog Island. We did have a fire truck, as you stated before, which was a pumper. And we had that for about 20 years. It was maintained by the town. And it just got so old that it couldn't be used anymore. Right now we have nothing, and I feel vulnerable. My house is far enough away from the water that we're not going to have any kind of a pump truck or a pump boat hit my house. I'm worried about the rest of the island catching on fire if we do have a fire. So I think this is a powerful tool that we can use, and I'd appreciate your approval.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Ms. Coleman, whoops, there's a last name, Mazziola. This is like an eye test. Yes, thank you for.
I'm sorry, I have a hyphenated name. I have no brothers, and Coleman is a great name. Everybody can spell it. My name is Jody Coleman Marziallo, and I actually live at 64 Beach Road, Plat 69 on Hog Island in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. I also have a primary residence in Connecticut, but I did want to mention, I did reach out to your tax assessor today, and he informed me, I put it in the chat, that the Hog Island seasonal residents have contributed over $310,000 to the town of Portsmouth just during the year 2021. As seasonal people, many of us are only there for 2 or 3 months. Many of us are weekenders, and that's a lot of tax revenue when we're really not getting very many benefits. There's no snow removal, there's no garbage pickup. None of our children attend any of the schools because, of course, we're there during the summer when there is no school. So this fire truck would be extremely beneficial. And we had one before, and we would love to have one again. I hope that you will consider this proposal by Mr. Ford, and I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe that we have a motion and second. And are there any more people who wanted to speak? No? All right, then. All those in favor?
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. The motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Ford.
There is a question. Yeah.
My name is Jim Sapp. I am a resident, summer resident of Hog Island, and I cannot thank Chief Ford enough for all of the effort he put into this thing. This has been a year in progress, and all of us on the island are fully recognize the amount of effort he put into this thing to make it happen. And I thank the council for allowing it to happen. Candidly, had we had any piece of this equipment on the island at the time our beloved boathouse caught fire, we would not be looking at a $600,000 bill to replace that iconic building.
So it is, again, we're in your debt of gratitude to the chief for making this all happen and to the council for approving it. Thank you very much on behalf of all of the residents of Hog Island.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we had that motion passed 6-0, and we are on to, request approval to abate 2009, 2010 delinquent taxes in the amount of $26,291.38. I am so sorry, Mr. Helfand, to keep you to the last item.
That's okay.
Did not realize.
That's
Thank
all right.
you.
This is just annual bookkeeping exercise.
I will make a motion that we approve, but as I look on this list, there are active businesses in town that are on this list that we should not be abating.
Well,
or we should be not giving them permits to continue business until they pay up their back taxes. I don't know how that works legally,
that's the trouble.
but to see somebody owing over $500 in taxes from 2009 and still out currently doing work doesn't make sense to me.
Well, our hands are tied. We send them to collection agencies, and if they can litigate, they will litigate.
Motion to approve the delinquent taxes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Helfand. And I believe that is the last new business item. We're on to correspondence.
Move to receive and place on file.
Seconded.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. Motion passes 6-0. Let's see.
There's a
We have
question?
future meetings.
Hang on a second. No,
Oh,
just a thank you. All set.
oh, thank you. Yes, so thank you for everyone who's testified today or spoken today. And the future meetings are June 15th, 7 PM, Town Council meeting budget hearing at Portsmouth Middle School. Then June 27th will be a regular meeting, 7 PM. July 11th, 7 PM, July 25th, 7 PM. So
Madam Clerk, did we decide when our summer break is going to be and what would correspond to staff's?
Suggestion.
July 25th was
Suggested. So I guess we can do that at the next meeting. This is really not on there, but I mean.
okay, so
To not have our summer break on the July 25th meeting, that gives the staff ability to have all their summer breaks without taxing the staff.
right, that's coming right up. Do we need to have, we can't decide that tonight? I hate to make people wait and wait and wait.
It's,
No, usually, just like at the Christmas one, it's not usually on the agenda. You just make
we
the,
just make it to schedule it decision.
Okay, so
So I
are
will
we?
make a motion that we forego the meeting on July 25th for our annual summer recess.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye, the motion carries 6-0. People can now make some plans.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye. So the motion passes 6-0. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for staying for so long,
Thank you.
and have a good evening.
Thank you. Good meeting, Linda.